Over the past couple of weeks, I've had multiple people ask me for some draft targets for the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, of course, the Blazers don't have a pick in this year's draft, which is a bit disappointing. However, they could potentially buy their way into the second round, or they could snatch up somebody that goes undrafted. In one of the deepest drafts in years, there's going to be some very serious value in the second round, as well as on the undrafted player market. When I got asked those questions, I said a video was coming. And here it is. This is that video. This is 7 draft prospects that the Portland Trail Blazers should target. These are guys that have intrigued me and I think would be interesting fits on the Portland Trail Blazers. Some of them I purely think are just insanely undervalued, and some of them I think would fit on our roster pretty well. Now, for all of these targets, I'd be willing to spend a mid to late second round pick on. A couple of them I would even reach early into the second, maybe even the late first to get them. I don't think it's likely that the Portland Trail Blazers end up with a late first or early second, but I think it's definitely possible they might end up with a mid second round pick. Now, if any of these guys go undrafted as well, the Blazers should definitely look to pick them up. So this applies not only to if the Blazers trade into the second round, but even if they don't make a pick. Most of these guys are prospects that could potentially go undrafted. In that scenario, a two-way contract or maybe even a normal rookie contract might make sense for these guys. So without further ado, here are those 7 draft prospects. This will go in chronological order, so we're starting off with Austin Reeves. This is a guard out of the University of Oklahoma. He started his college career at Wichita State, and I know some of you guys want to throw up every time you hear the word guard when it comes to a draft prospect. I get it, but I think this guy is seriously undervalued. Right now, his draft range is late second round. I have a borderline first round grade on him. This is a guy who only shot 30% from 3 last year, but shot it better earlier in his career, and I think he's a better shooter than that percentage indicates. If he can become a good 3-point shooter, I think he's going to be a good NBA role player because he is a 6'5" playmaker. He's very crafty off the dribble. He's a very crafty finisher. He's quick with the ball. He's deceptive. He's shifty. He can finish at the rim, like I said, and he can also pass the ball as well. At 6'5", that's pretty good traits to have in a shooting guard. You just need to be able to have him hit 3-point shots, and I think he'll be able to do so, which is why I have a borderline first round grade on him. All of these prospects will have a link to some footage on them in the description below if you want to go look at some of the footage from these guys, like in Austin Reeves. And also, before we move on, I forgot to say this in the intro, I dropped a mock draft yesterday, so if you want some more draft content, go check that out. The next guy we have up is Chris Smith out of UCLA. Now, this is a guy who tore his ACL in early January this year. I know some of you are screaming, oh, an injured guy. You got a guard number 1 and an injured guy number 2, but he's a 6'9" guard who can knock down the 3-point shot. He shot 34% in his junior season at UCLA. This past season, which was cut short in 8 games at 2.5 attempts per game, he was making half of them. He was shooting 50%. I like his shooting form. This is a guy who is also a good defensive player and also has some upside off the bounce. So if he can recover from this ACL injury, I project him as a 3-and-D player with maybe upside for more. And as a guy that's probably going to go undrafted because of his injury, that'd be a great guy to take a flyer on with a 2-way contract, in my opinion. I mean, we used our 2-way contracts this past season on Kelvin Blevins and TJ Leaf, so I would like Chris Smith on a 2-way contract, assuming he goes undrafted, because I think he's one of those guys where 5 years from now you look back and say, how did he end up going undrafted? This third guy has been a favorite of mine for a while. That is Herb Jones. He's a combo forward out of the University of Alabama. He stands at 6 feet 6 inches tall, but has over a 7-foot wingspan, and he has an 8'10" standing reach. That means, in my opinion, he has the size to play the small forward and the power forward position. I like him more as a power forward because he's a guy that can take guys off the dribble. He's athletic for that position. He can defend forwards pretty well. He's a good defensive player, and he's also a good passer. He showed big flashes of playmaking and passing upside this past season. The one thing he needs to figure out is his 3-point shot, but if he can become a good 3-point shooter, he has a chance at being one of the top 10 or 15 players from this draft, and being able to get somebody with his traits and potentially potentially the middle of the second round, if the Blazers are able to trade into that range, would be a huge get for the Portland Trail Blazers and the type of combo forward that would be nice to have developing in our system. Number 4 is a personal favorite of mine. That is JoJo Ayahi from the University of Gonzaga. I think this guy would be a great fit. He is a guard, but he's a guard who I think could have an impact right away on a good team. He got the luxury of playing on a stacked Gonzaga team last year. I think his role on that Gonzaga team will be his role in the NBA. A lot of times draft prospects will have had a leading role. They would have been the leading scorer at their college or university, and then they come into the NBA and they have to adjust to being a complementary piece. JoJo Ayahi was a complimentary piece last year, and I think he can play the same exact way in the same exact role as he did for Gonzaga in the NBA. He upped his three-point percentage last season. He shot around 38%. He's a solid defensive player. He's not great, but I wouldn't say he's going to be bad either. He needs to become a little bit quicker laterally. If he's able to do so, I think he'll be a good defender because he's definitely smart on that end. He's a really good cutter, a phenomenal cutter. So if you have some playmaking bigs, if you have a movement offense, he fits into that very, very well. And he's also a really good offensive rebounder for his position. It's kind of one of the more surprising traits about him. He just has a nose for the ball. And then on top of that, at 6'5", he can provide some secondary playmaking ability. He's not a guy that's going to average 6-7 assists per game. He's not a true point guard by any means, but in a pinch, if he develops correctly, he's a guy that you can play as a big point guard that can make the right pass and make the right play and initiate the offense. The 5th prospect I have is Moses Wright, who's a big man out of Georgia Tech University. He stands at 6'8", but he has a 7'1" wingspan and 8'11" standing reach. He's an athlete, a very good pick and roll finisher. He's a lob target. In terms of athleticism and size at the 4, he has both of those things. Also, he shot over 40% from 3 this past season, and he is a good defender. He's a mobile defender who has the athleticism and enough length and size to protect the rim as well. He can run multiple pick and roll schemes defensively. This is a guy who I think is extremely underrated as we head into the draft. He could potentially go undrafted. If he went undrafted, I would want the Portland Trail Blazers to sign him to a normal contract, not just a two-way contract, a normal contract, because I think this guy is going to be a good role player in the NBA. And it's likely that there's guys that go above him that honestly truly shouldn't. Next up is Nemanja Kelda from Utah State. This is a rim protecting center who stands 6'11", has a 7'4" wingspan. His standing reach is 9'4.5" inches, so he has true size for the center position. He's a guy, as I said, that can rim protect, that can defend well. He's also a very good rebounder and a good finisher on the interior, and he also showed some flashes of playmaking, which I think makes him a little bit more intriguing of a prospect. If he hadn't showed those playmaking flashes last year at Utah State, I probably wouldn't have him on this list, but you know the Portland Trail Blazers, at least under Stotts, love their passing bigs, and you have Jusuf Nurkic still as a passing big. Hopefully we're able to get another passing big, which I've talked about in another video, but I like passing big men, especially if they can rim protect and play defense and rebound, and that's what Nemanja Kelda is, so I would definitely take a flyer on him if possible. He might go undrafted, but I would assume he gets selected between 45 and 55 in the draft. Maybe the Portland Trail Blazers can trade into that range and take him, especially considering some of the poor injury luck we've had with our big men in past years. It might be worth it to get a guy who might be able to be serviceable in a pinch if you had to play him as an insurance policy. Hopefully we don't have to do that. Hopefully we don't have injury issues. I'll knock on wood every time I say the word injury, but Nemanja Kelda is definitely a guy I would take a flyer on for the Portland Trail Blazers. And last but not least, I have Trendon Watford, who is a projected undrafted prospect right now, but is a guy that definitely intrigues me as a 6'9" forward who can handle the ball and make plays for others. He stands at 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan. He has an 8'9" standing reach, so he's slightly undersized for the power forward position, but I think he can definitely play that position. I think that is his true position. I don't think he's a guy who you'll see playing much center, maybe in small ball lineups, but I don't think he'll play much center, and then I don't think he'll play much small forward. He's a true power forward in my opinion, but he's a guy who averaged almost 3 assists per game last year, 16 points per game for LSU. He had some really big offensive moments where he was taking this guy off the dribble, getting into the paint at will, and then when multiple defenders defenders were sent his way, he would find the right pass, the right kick out option, and he was a guy that kind of ran that LSU offense there last year in college. So I'm intrigued by playmaking bigs that show flashes of passing ability, especially if they're able to score a little bit themselves as well. Now, his two biggest knocks is he only shot 31% from three last year. He has to kind of overhaul his form a little bit. I don't think his release is bad, but he leans back too much on his shot and his shot is too slow. If he can end up being a good three-point shooter and a guy that's able to knock down threes, then you're really going to have to pick your poison with him. Either get out all the way and take away that three, and then he's a threat to drive by you and get to the rim himself and finish himself, or make the right kick out pass out of that scenario. Or you can, knock it out on his three-point shot and he'll knock down threes, hopefully for his case. So that is kind of the idealistic vision of him as an offensive player. Defensively, he has some question marks. He has to improve there. He will probably never be a good NBA defender, but if he can add a three-point shot and then hopefully become an average NBA defender, I think he will be a good and versatile role player in the league. That's pretty good for a guy who's projected to go undrafted. I would definitely look at Trendon Watford for a two-way contract for the Portland Trail Blazers. Anyway, that wraps up this draft prospects video. Let me know if there's somebody that I didn't include in my list that you have on yours, somebody that you think the Portland Trail Blazers should target in this year's draft as either a guy to buy into the second round for or a guy to sign as an undrafted free agent. Let me know down in the comment section below. I'm very curious to see what names you guys have for me. With that being said, that's a wrap for this video. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.